What's up, kings and queens? How y'all doing? This is the Royalty Inspired channel. Y'all know this is Martez Royalty, just coming to y'all again. So I just wanted to come to y'all because I had something to hit my heart that really rubbed me the wrong way. So before I start this story, I want to give all my sympathy, all my condolences, all my respect to the Hembrick family, and any other families that have been a victim of gun violence due to police abusing their authority. So let me get right into it. So this is Daniel Hembrick. He was shot in the back by police, running from the police. And today, this ignorant police officer, he just got 3 years for killing this man. And he accepted the plea deal. Nobody notified the family. Nobody let them know what was going on. And it is very disturbing. And it really just shows the state in which we live in, which is the Republican state. They do what they want to do. I'm going to let y'all look at the video.
Informed, connected. This is News Channel 5 at 5. Just look at the tape. What if it's your child? It's not my child. What if it's your child? That was the emotional reaction of Daniel Hembrick's mother after hearing her son's killer, former Metro Police Officer Andrew Delkey, pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter. The charge comes with a 3-year sentence.
And we have team coverage tonight of the fallout, both inside and outside the courtroom, and a look at how this plea deal came together. First, Levi Ismail was in court today. Levi, what led up to that emotional outburst?
You know, almost as soon as Judge Monty Watkins began speaking, we heard from the family attorney and the Hembrick family themselves as they pled for trying to make sure that this plea agreement did not go through. Judge Monty Watkins explained that both sides will have an opportunity to speak and, just have that moment so that they can share their thoughts with the jury or with the court. And Delkey was the first to do so.
I recognize that what happened on July 26th. 2018 was tragic. Mrs. Hembrick lost her son that day, and I am responsible for her loss. Excuse me. These are facts that I will have to live with for the rest of my life. And no mother should ever have to experience the loss of a child.
Family attorney Joy Kimbrough was up next and explained how Daniel's mother, Vicky, had no input on this plea deal. Here's what she had to say.
No one consulted her. Your Honor, yesterday about 2:30 p.m., she found out for the first time that the deal had been done, that it was a foregone conclusion, that his fate had already been determined. They didn't need a jury because white men decided. They decided what was best for this community and for Ms. Hembrick. Judge, you have the power. The power is used across the state and other states too. You can reject this plea deal. You can say not on my watch. I'm not accepting this plea deal. And we're begging you. The citizens are begging you, Judge Monty Watkins.
His man already made up. You can look in his face.
And reject this plea deal.
Yes. Now, after that powerful statement, Hembrick spoke herself. Everyone could feel just how hurt she was, but I doubt anyone expected the chaos that happened after. She had to be restrained after her emotions boiled over. The family stormed out of the courtroom as Delkey and his family were escorted to another room. Court stopped right there for an hour until Delkey was brought back and was formally convicted of voluntary manslaughter. Now, here's what that means. Delkey was sentenced to 3 years in jail and will serve that time here at the Davidson County Jail. Now, my colleague Jason Lamb was outside the courtroom during much of this. And so, Jason, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of walk us through what you saw on your end.
Yeah, Levi, it all happened really, really quickly. After all that inside the courtroom, the Hembrick family came outside where they joined a lot of protesters that were here too. It began very quietly with about 24 protesters gathered out here as the hearing continued, with people watching it on their phones outside. Then came Vicki Hambrick's emotional testimony inside the courtroom. That ended, as Levi mentioned, and the Hambrick family exited through the courthouse doors, joining the people gathered outside to protest, where they had a lot more to say because they were upset that the DA did not ask them, they said, about whether that plea deal was acceptable to them.
We get handed a sentence. We got a sentence forced up on us, a plea. This ain't right. This is not right, man. He dropped the ball on this. Glenn Funk dropped the ball. He dropped the ball. No justice, injustice I ever seen it. We were never contacted, nor nobody tried to get in touch with us to let us know that this plea deal was going to be made.
Just so much for this family to process today after this sentence that the family says is just not fair for the death of Daniel Hambrick.
And Jason, I know the Hambrick family mentioned both DA Glenn Funk and Judge Monty Watkins' terms expire next year, and they both have to run for re-election to keep their jobs.
Yeah, that's right, Vicki. You know, that is something that both the family of Daniel Hambrick and the protesters mentioned today. They said that that is something they're going to be focusing on now. They say they're going to be trying to put everything they have into trying to make sure that DA Glenn Funk and Judge Monty Watkins do not get reelected next year if they run for reelection. Both the judge and the DA have 8-year terms that expire in 2022.
Jason, thank you both. Metro Police Chief John Drake released a statement on his former officer's plea deal. Quote, today's guilty plea ends 3 years of waiting by the Hambrick family, the Delkey family, our police department, and Nashville as a whole. Chief Drake went on to say, it is my hope that with today's court action, we can all continue to move forward, knowing that we cannot undo the events of July 26, 2018. My clear priorities continue to be precision policing, de-escalation, and strengthening community partnership. Chief Drake was not the acting chief when the shooting occurred.
But the Hambrick family says they can't move forward because
That's right.
they weren't given their day in court. Daniel's cousin Sam gave an emotional plea after today's hearing.
They thought that we was going to let this go and let this slide. Oh, we got a guilty verdict. Okay, 3 years. Oh, no, buddy. Oh, no. I would never see my cousin again. I got to go to his grave this afternoon. I got to go to his grave this afternoon. Do y'all know that feeling? We didn't get a chance. And that's why we right here today. Not a chance. We didn't get a chance. And that's because of the system.
We also spoke with Delkey's attorney after the hearing, who maintained that this case was not as cut and dry as people make it out to be. He claims the plea deal was the best outcome for everyone involved.
Mr. Delkey's plea today gives closure and finality for himself and his family and the hope of the community. We can now look forward and hope for progress with the many issues facing our country.
Delkey is already inside the Davidson County Detention Center, where he will spend at least the next year and a half.
Oh, Lord.
The Sheriff's Office tells us after his precautionary observation ends, he'll spend 22 hours a day alone in this jail cell and will also have his recreation time alone.
Of course, we'll never know how the murder case would have played out in front of a jury of 12, and that fear of the unknown is exactly why DA Glenn Funk says he decided not to gamble.
News Channel 5's chief investigative reporter Phil Williams has been taking an in-depth look at the reasons behind this plea deal. Phil?
Well, ladies, the Hambrick family obviously wanted Andrew Delkey found guilty on all murder charges. In the end, Funk said this was the only way that he could promise a conviction.
It's been a long 3-year struggle, and this has never been a slam dunk case for a murder prosecution.
DA Glenn Funk said taking Andrew Delkey to trial would have been a gamble.
If we tried this case, we're ready to try this case. We've been ready. We've been working for 3 years to get this case ready. But what would the result of the case be? there was a very large percentage that would have been a hung jury.
While prosecutors did not
And I don't see how.
Hambrick did anything to justify being shot in the back as he ran for police,
Right.
they also worried that some jurors would believe he brought it upon himself when he refused commands to stop. That Hambrick was armed with a gun might also have been a problem for some jurors.
The reality is that would have made it a much more difficult case to get 12 jurors to unanimously believe that this was a murder case.
At the same time, Delkey and his attorneys knew that if convicted, he faced the possibility of spending much of his life behind bars.
Mrs. Hambrick lost her son that day, and I am responsible for her loss.
So after the now former police officer agreed to accept the responsibility and plead guilty to manslaughter charges, Funk's team decided it was better to have a conviction than to risk walking away with nothing.
Is that I was not willing to risk not having a felony conviction, not having him off the force, not having him incarcerated.
They about to take you out of here. Because I've been through a lot.
And no verdict, no judgment, no accountability. The emotion that we saw in this courtroom today would have been played out 100-fold if there had been no accountability in this case.
Coming up at 6, we'll take an in-depth look at 2 cases where police were taken to trial on homicide charges, and you'll see why prosecutors may have decided this plea bargain was their best option. Carrie?
Phil, thank you. We already know that Andrew Delkey won't face any civil penalties for the shooting. That's because back in March, the Metro Council and the Hambrick family agreed on a $2.2 million settlement in exchange for a dismissal of all civil claims against the former officer and the city.
Obviously, there's still a lot of fallout happening around this case. To get breaking push alerts and to keep up to date as things develop, just download the News Channel 5 app.
Another road rage shooting.